Rainbow Rowell's taking over the world. All hail Rainbow. Rainbow Rowell is one of the most talked about authors on BookTube. Rainbow Rowell is the love child of Jane Austen and Nora Ephron, just saying. Rainbow Rowell is capable of making grown men cry with just a biro. One time, she slapped me in the face and it was awesome. Today I'm going to be speaking about her first book, Attachments, which is an adult romance novel following Lincoln, a shy IT guy in 1999. His job is reading the emails of everyone in the office to make sure they're not fucking about or skiving or looking at porn. He finds himself drawn into the conversations of Beth and Jennifer who work there, finds himself falling for one of them. A lot of people compared Attachments to You've Got Mail, the Nora Ephron movie, and it does have that same sort of 90s cozy, textured romance vibe, although I actually think that it has more depth and more interesting themes than You've Got Mail. There's also something about the kind of depth of the male lead, Lincoln, that reminds me of Nick Hornby's books, so About a Boy, High Fidelity. It wouldn't be crazy to compare this to some Austen, to be honest. It's that same sort of character-driven literary romance, and I'm going to get into the concept of literary romance a bit later. So Rainbow Rowell actually worked at the newspaper in her hometown for 10 years, and that really comes through in the sort of depth and intricacy with which she portrays the Courier, which is the newspaper in which Attachments is set. Apparently writing Attachments was partially driven by her editors saying that her jokes weren't really funny anymore, so she wrote Attachments as a kind of catharsis, a place where she could write whatever she actually found really funny. And that really struck home for me as a person who's still finding their voice on YouTube and figuring out how much they enjoy making themselves laugh with stupid jokes. And you know, it's a nice contrast as well to the whole girls can't be funny myth, or that we're not naturally funny, or that we're not capable of it, or we are all robots. That was hilarious, you know, case in point. I should really have thought of a really good joke to put on the end of that, but I didn't. So thanks, fast Rachel. I'm going to speak about three main things about Attachments. First I'm going to start with Lincoln as a main character, then I'm going to move on to genre and maybe subverting genre, and then I'm going to finish with some chat about the themes. Lincoln as a main character is a really fantastic subversion of a pretty familiar trope to anyone who spent any length of time on the internet, of the really shy, isolated, emotionally illiterate, nerdy guy who lives in his mum's basement and has all this unjust frustration with women for not dating him. He's really good with computers and really bad with people. Lincoln himself worries a lot about his own image, so this idea of him as sort of creepy guy who enjoys invading other people's privacy because that's his job, is to read other people's emails. He lives with his mum because he's codependent, that he can't get a girlfriend, that he escapes into Dungeons and Dragons because he can't face real life. Lincoln himself is such a great character because there are parts of these things that he does live up to, but they're really explained in a really interesting way. In reality, Lincoln's really conflicted about the invasive nature of his job. It makes him really uncomfortable at points. He's kind, he's smart, he's funny. He is generally shy and awkward around women, but never at slapstick levels, and it never becomes like a caricature, and you can kind of see why he is. He does live with his mum, but we find out there are a lot of complicated reasons for that. His relationship with his mum is really complicated and interesting. It's as much about her issues as it is about his. He doesn't necessarily think that it's a good thing, but to some extent he doesn't feel like he has any other choice. He's a sort of passive, quiet one in his relationship with Sam, maybe to the point of it even being a character flaw, but he grows, he changes, he gets more confident as the book goes on. He plays Dungeons and Dragons once a week with the same people. It's not about escape for him, it's actually this sort of warm, social circle of friends that he meets up with, and I really like that idea in direct opposition to role-playing games as being sort of antisocial and like strangely introverted. Lincoln is really in touch with his emotions. He's not emotionally illiterate or emotionally stunted. There's a really nice contrast here with another of the male characters, Chris, who is meant to sort of embody this sort of sensitive artist type. He's a musician. The stereotypical idea would be that he is really emotionally perceptive, but in reality, in the way he acts in the book towards Beth, he's either really not emotionally perceptive or he sees and he just doesn't care. I thought that was a really nice contrast between Lincoln and Chris. Lincoln does have problems in his relationships with women, but it's never unjust frustration. He never feels entitled. He has been genuinely hurt by his ex, Sam, and is in the process of recovering from it. Lincoln is just a really great character. He's so complicated, there's so much detail in there, and it really feels like you're inhabiting someone else's body. In a lot of ways I can't imagine someone more different from me, but I feel like I know him inside out. So let's get a bit meta and talk about genre. I was initially sort of like, what is this? In so many ways it's a standard rom-com, albeit a very well executed one. It's really not typical for rom-coms or books targeted towards women to have a male lead. It's definitely a romance. Is it targeted towards women? Is it marketed towards women? Does that make sense? Is that part of what defines a romance? I find myself reflexively tempted to say that it's more than a romance. Romance is maybe just the medium through which Attachments deals with its themes about privacy, connection, intimacy and loneliness in the digital age. But is that insulting to romance as a genre? Why do I have to qualify that? Why does romance need to mean not literary? Why do I feel tempted to say it's not just romance? It kind of gets me thinking about High Fidelity by Nick Hornby, which I mentioned before, because in a lot of ways High Fidelity is a romance. It's about a romantic relationship. It's about Rob puzzling his way through sort of dysfunctional elements of his personality and how they get in his way in his relationship with Laura, and it ends with a kiss and the, not really marriage, but you know, a DJ set, so same diff. Why is High Fidelity just a book with romance elements and Attachments is a romance with book elements? I think the two are kind of related and raises some questions about the way the books are treated between male and female authors. I think Nick Hornby would fucking love Attachments, actually. So yeah, I like that Attachments makes me ask those kind of questions, even though I don't really have any answers to them. So lastly, let's talk about some themes, because there's a lot in there to unpack. The main sort of overarching idea that Attachments is maybe challenging is the sort of attitude that the internet is the end of civilization as we know it, and you know, the sort of predominantly baby boomer knee-jerk reaction that people are always on their phones these days. Email has replaced letters, which are much more romantic, though they're just words in a different format. Attachments is really positive about the internet. Email is the way in which we experience Jeth and Benefers. How many times? I've said Jeth and Benifer 3 times now. So clearly, Rainbow Rowell, you should have just named them that, because I'm clearly tapping into some kind of primordial linguistic dimension. Email's the way that we experience Beth and Jennifer's really profound friendship. Lincoln's relationship with email and the internet literally changes his life. Without it, he would never have known Beth, and knowing Beth changes him. It helps him discover himself and better his life. None of it would ever have happened without the internet and without email. When it comes to privacy and trust as a theme, there's this really nice juxtaposition between this sort of backdrop of the newspaper being really suspicious and paranoid about what people are doing on the internet. That kind of offsets Beth and Lincoln's naivety. They're both very trusting, romantic people who end up being burned by it, by Sam and Chris. Sam and Chris, however, as their sort of meat space partners, manage to actually be less real and less present to Beth and Lincoln than they are to each other, even though they've never met in real life. I really loved what that says about the way people connect and the ways that people can fall in love. There's also another interesting little dynamic with Lincoln and the fact that he has a total lack of privacy from his mom and his family, like that he's living there and he doesn't have any space for himself, and the fact that in the office he's the one with all the power, he's the one who gets to see everyone's emails and decide what is private and what isn't, and gets to sort of see into other people's lives. I don't know that I have any flaws for this book. It succeeds at what it sets out to do. Yeah, based on this book, I think Rainbow Rowell's phenomenon status is pretty well deserved. The only other thing I've read of hers is Fangirl, which I really liked, but I just enjoyed Attachments more. I liked that it was adult and they just had more depth to the themes and layers, layery onion goodness. I'm Rachael Stephen. I'm an author as well as a booktuber. You can head to rachelstephen.com if you fancy flirting a bit with my book State of Flux. If that goes well, you can even go on a date and read 3 chapters for free over there too. If you haven't already, I'd consider subscribing to my channel, because subscription is now mandatory and the Sheriff's Secret Police will be enforcing that as of next week. And yeah, that's it really. Bye! This video wasn't as funny as last time. There was a lot less penis jokes in this video, so who knows if that's good or not. I say this every time, but this is taking too long. I need to move on with my life. I've got shit to do. So I'm going to speak about 3 main things. That's 4, Rachel. for Mean Girls now? Mean Girls. Mean Gulls. Mean Girls, except they're all replaced with seagulls. Mean Girls in Aberdeen. Mean Girls. Why didn't I just have a line written for this?